There is a truth I need you to grab hold of today, a truth that can free you from fear, anxiety, and sleepless nights. You see, the system around you will rise and fall, prices will change, markets will crash, but your source never changes. The same God who fed Elijah in a drought, who provided manna in the wilderness, is the same God watching over you right now. The economy may have limits, but heaven has no shortage. So stop watching the headlines and start watching the source. Because when God is your provider, your supply will never run dry. Your provision comes from above, not around you. Let that sink in for a moment. Because too many of us are living as if our entire existence depends on the numbers in a bank account, the performance of a job, or the state of an economy. But what happens when those things fail? What happens when the paycheck doesn't come, or the business slows down, or the market collapses? Do you panic? Do you lose sleep? Or do you remember the source? The problem is, we've been conditioned to think that our supply comes from the hands of men, when in reality, everything man gives you is temporary, but everything God gives you is eternal. Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow, they don't reap, they don't gather into barns, yet your Father feeds them every single day. If He takes care of them, what about you? You see, your environment is just the delivery system, not the source. Your job is not your provider, it is only a channel. The government is not your sustainer, it is only a vessel. People may be the ones handing you opportunities, but God is the one sending them your way. That's why when one channel closes, you don't have to fall apart, because your source has an unlimited number of ways to reach you. When you understand this, you stop chasing people and you start trusting God. You stop depending on headlines and you start depending on promises. You stop worrying about what if, and you start declaring even if. Even if the economy falls apart, even if the contract is canceled, even if the market turns upside down, my source will not run dry. So ask yourself today, where have you been looking for provision? Around you or above you? Because if your eyes are fixed on the wrong source, your peace will always be at risk. But if your eyes are fixed on heaven, you will walk in a confidence this world cannot understand. And that brings me to the next truth. If heaven's economy never goes bankrupt, then why are so many people living like they're one paycheck away from disaster? Let's talk about that. The kingdom's economy never goes bankrupt, never. Think about that. Nations can fall, currencies can collapse, markets can dry up overnight, but the kingdom's resources are inexhaustible. The world measures wealth in numbers, but the kingdom measures wealth in the limitless supply of the King himself. And if you belong to that kingdom, you are connected to a source that will never face a recession, never be downgraded, never be in debt. That's why the promises of God don't fluctuate with the stock market. His word is not subject to inflation. His supply is not affected by shortages, and his abundance is not limited by earthly systems. When the world is shouting, cut back, hold on, survive, the kingdom is whispering, trust, step forward, thrive. This is why you can walk in peace when everyone else is in panic, because you know you are not living under the economy of man. You are living under the economy of heaven. Do you remember the widow in the time of famine? While others were losing everything, she encountered a word from God, and her jar of oil never ran dry. Do you remember Joseph in Egypt? While other nations starved, Egypt prospered because of a kingdom principle at work. The lesson: the kingdom's economy operates by faith, not fear. It is built on God's integrity, not man's instability. So let me ask you, what are you aligning yourself with? The unstable flow of the world's system, or the unshakable foundation of the kingdom? Because if you're rooted in the kingdom, you'll prosper in seasons when others are struggling. You'll rise in moments when others are falling. and you'll testify of abundance when others can only speak of loss. Stop letting fear dictate your future. Stop letting the news tell you what is possible. Remember, you serve a king who owns it all, who lacks nothing, and who delights in meeting the needs of his children. That's not just theology, that's reality. And here's the powerful truth we need to uncover next. If the kingdom's economy is unshakable, then what is the currency that moves it? How do you make withdrawals from a limitless supply? The answer will change everything. Faith is the currency that never loses value, never. You can't buy it, you can't trade it, you can't counterfeit it, but when you have it, you can access everything heaven has promised. Faith is the only currency accepted in the kingdom. Not dollars, not gold, not crypto, not credit. And unlike earthly money, faith never depreciates, it never gets devalued, it never loses its purchasing power. This is why the word says, without faith, it is impossible to please God, because faith is not just believing God exists. Faith is acting on what he has said, even when every visible circumstance says otherwise. Faith doesn't wait for proof, it becomes the proof. Faith doesn't wait for the storm to pass, it walks on water in the middle of it. Faith doesn't ask, what if it doesn't work? It declares, it will work because God said it will. When you walk in faith, you stop being limited by what you see. You stop living according to the economy of man, and you start living according to the supply of heaven. Think about it. Every miracle in Scripture was a transaction made with faith. The woman with the issue of blood didn't pay for her healing with money. She paid with faith. The centurion's servant wasn't healed because of influence or status, but because of faith. The loaves and fishes fed thousands, not because of their market value, but because faith multiplied them. So, here's the question, what's in your wallet? Not your physical wallet, but your spiritual one. Are you carrying doubt, fear, hesitation? Or are you carrying faith, expectation, and trust? Because the size of your faith determines the size of your transactions in the kingdom. And remember, faith is not seasonal. It works in famine and in plenty. Faith is not fragile. It can stand through storms. Faith is not optional. It is essential. If you want to make withdrawals from heaven's unlimited account, you must have the currency that never fails. But here's where it gets interesting. If faith is the currency, then what is the system God uses to deliver the resources into your life? The answer will shift the way you see every blessing you've ever received. God's supply chain cannot be broken, not by inflation, not by shortages, not by political instability, not even by global crisis. When heaven decides to get something to you, nothing on earth and nothing in hell can stop it. The world's supply chains depend on ships, trucks, factories, and people. But God's supply chain operates through supernatural channels you can't always see, and yet it always arrives right on time. Think about the Israelites in the wilderness. There were no farms, no markets, no delivery systems, yet every morning there was fresh manna waiting. That wasn't a coincidence. That was heaven's supply chain in motion. Think about Elijah during the drought while the land was starving. God sent ravens to deliver bread and meat to him daily. No customs, no delays, no shortages, just provision on schedule every time. You see, when God is your source, he doesn't need a human system to keep you supplied. He can bypass the channels of man and create a brand, new one just for you. He can open doors that don't even exist yet. He can cause resources to find you instead of you chasing them. And the beauty of it is this: his supply is never late, never lacking, and never limited. So why do we panic when the world announces a shortage? Why do we lose sleep when prices go up? Could it be that we've forgotten the track record of the one who has never missed a delivery? If he can feed a nation in the desert for 40 years, if he can feed a prophet through birds in the sky, if he can multiply oil in a widow's jar, do you really think your situation is too complicated for him? Here's the truth. When you trust in God's supply chain, you live with a different kind of confidence. You stop wondering if the provision will come, and you start expecting when it will come. You know that the source has already dispatched what you need, and all you have to do is stay in position to receive it. But this leads us to a deeper reality. If God's supply chain is unstoppable, then why do some people still live in lack? The next principle will answer that, and it might just surprise you. The true source behind every resource is not the company that hires you, not the client that pays you, not the market that buys from you. It is God Himself. Everything you see in your life right now, every open door, every paycheck, every opportunity, every idea, it all came from the same source. People may have been the hands that delivered it, but they were never the origin. This is why you must never confuse the channel with the source. A channel can close, a person can change, a company can downsize, but the source remains the same. If your eyes are fixed on the channel, you'll panic when it dries up. But if your eyes are fixed on the source, you'll simply wait for Him to open a new one. Remember, when one brook dried up for Elijah, God had already prepared a widow in another city to sustain him. The resource changed, but the source did not. So many people are living in fear because they've put their trust in a single stream, forgetting that the one who gave them that stream can open 100 more. That's why you should never let your job define your provision. Never let a business define your identity, and never let a human define your security. Because when you know the true source, you realize He can bless you through expected means or through completely unexpected ones. The truth is, God can use anyone, anywhere, at any time to get to you what He has promised. He can turn the heart of a stranger to favor you. He can cause a door you didn't even knock on to swing wide open. He can make resources appear from directions you never considered. And when that happens, you will know without a doubt it wasn't luck, it wasn't coincidence, it was the source working behind the scenes. So I ask you today, are you trusting the channels or the source? Because the channel is only the wrapping paper. The real gift comes from above. And once you understand that, you stop fearing loss and start expecting increase. But here's where it gets even more powerful. If the source is unlimited, then what keeps us from fully tapping into His supply? The answer will challenge everything you thought you knew about provision. Living beyond the limits of the world system means you are no longer confined to the rise and fall of human structures, economies, and predictions. It means you operate from a higher law, a greater reality, a kingdom reality. The world says, save enough, work harder, climb higher, compete stronger. But the kingdom says, seek first, trust fully, obey completely, and watch provision overtake you. When you live beyond the limits of the world system, you stop letting statistics decide your destiny. You stop letting news reports dictate your peace. You stop allowing fear to guide your decisions, because you understand the world system is temporary, fragile, and unpredictable. But the kingdom is eternal, unshakable, and unstoppable. This is why some people can prosper in the middle of a crisis. This is why some businesses thrive while others fail under the same conditions. It's because their source of supply is not rooted in the shifting sands of man's system, but in the solid rock of God's promises. Remember Isaac. In the middle of famine, he planted in dry ground and reaped 100-fold that same year. That's not the world's system. That's kingdom overflow. The danger comes when you try to mix the two systems. You can't depend on heaven for provision, but still let fear from the world control your actions. You can't declare God as your source, yet panic every time the economy dips. You have to decide, Will you be governed by what's happening around you or by what's been promised to you when you choose to live beyond the limits of the world's system? You become like Peter stepping out of the boat. The waves are still there. The storm is still raging, but your focus is no longer on the wind. It's on the one calling you forward. And as long as your eyes are fixed on him, you can walk where others sink, you can rise where others fall, and you can receive when others are in lack. But here's the question we must face next. If the kingdom is calling us to live above the world's limits, then what happens when heaven itself becomes your employer? The answer will completely redefine how you see work and provision. When heaven becomes your employer, everything changes. Your provision is no longer tied to a paycheck, a position, or a promotion. It's tied to the promises of God. The world may give you wages, but heaven gives you inheritance. An inheritance is not earned by hours worked, it's received by relationship. When heaven employs you, your benefits are supernatural, your security is eternal, and your supply is unlimited. You see, an earthly employer can hire you today and fire you tomorrow. They can cut your hours, reduce your pay, or eliminate your role. But when heaven hires you, the contract is sealed in covenant. No crisis can terminate it. No economy can downgrade it. No human decision can override it. And here's the beautiful truth. When heaven is your employer, the resources of the entire kingdom are backing you. This is why some people have testimonies that make no sense in the natural. They get opportunities they didn't apply for, receive payments they didn't expect, and find doors opening in places they never even looked. It's because their source is not a boss sitting behind a desk. Their source is the king sitting on the throne. But here's the catch. When heaven becomes your employer, you must also work by heaven's standards. You don't just clock in with your hands, you clock in with your heart. You work with integrity when no one's watching. You sow seeds of generosity without expecting applause. You operate in excellence because you're working for the king, not for man. And when you work for heaven, you can rest without fear. You can take a Sabbath without anxiety. You can give without worrying about losing, because you know the one who signs your checks never runs out of ink, and his pay schedule, always on time, always enough, always more than you expected. But there's still one more truth we must uncover. If heaven is your employer and the source never runs dry, then the only real danger is where you're anchored. And that takes us to a powerful final revelation that will determine whether you stand strong or collapse when the storms come. Anchored in the source, not in the market, means your stability, your peace, your confidence are rooted in something that cannot be shaken. The market will rise and fall. Trends will come and go. Industries will boom and then collapse. But the source, the one who owns it all, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. When your anchor is in him, you are not tossed around by every wave of bad news. You are steady, unmovable, unshaken. The problem is, too many people are anchored in unstable things. They're tied to jobs, investments, possessions, and positions. And when those things shift, their whole life shifts with it. But if your anchor is in the source, the storm may rage, the boat may rock, but you will not drift off course. You can face uncertainty without fear, because you know your future is not hanging by the threads of an unstable market. It's secured by the unbreakable promises of God. Think about a ship in the middle of the ocean. If the anchor is too light or set in the wrong place, the waves will carry it away. But when the anchor is dropped deep into solid ground, no matter how strong the storm, the ship holds its position. That's what happens when your life is anchored in the source. The economy may shake, but you don't. The market may panic, but you rest. Opportunities may dry up for others, but provision still finds its way to you. And here's the truth. The enemy will always try to get you to move your anchor, He'll use fear, pressure, and temptation to make you trust in what you see instead of what you know. But every time you feel the pull to depend on the market, you must remind yourself, the market is not my provider, the source is. My job is not my sustainer, the source is. My investments are not my safety, the source is. Because when your anchor is set in Him, you can survive any storm, outlast any drought, and walk through any crisis with peace. And that's why the next step is so critical, knowing how to position yourself so the flow of provision never stops, no matter what season you're in. That is where we go next. Anchored in the source, not in the market. This is the secret to stability in unstable times. You see, the market will rise and fall, industries will change, currencies will lose value, and opportunities will come and go. But when your life is anchored in the unchanging source, the one who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the one whose resources never run dry, you are no longer at the mercy of unpredictable systems. You stand firm, unshaken, no matter what the headlines say. The danger is many people anchor themselves to the wrong things. They tie their peace to a paycheck, their identity to a position, their security to a bank balance. And when those things shift, their entire life begins to drift. But when you drop your anchor deep into the source, the storm may rage, the waves may crash, yet you remain steady because your foundation is not in what can change, it is in the one who cannot change. Think about a ship at sea. If the anchor is set in sand, the waves will pull it away. But when the anchor is set in solid rock, it holds its ground no matter how violent the storm becomes. That's what happens when you put your trust in God as your source. The economy may tremble, but you will not. The market may panic, but you will be at peace. The world may run out of options, but provision will still find its way to you. The truth is, the enemy's goal is to make you lift your anchor. He will use fear to make you depend on the market instead of the source. He will use pressure to make you believe that your job is your life, that your investments are your hope. But when you know the source, you can look at every threat, every storm, and still declare, I will not be moved. Because when you are anchored in the source, you can outlast any crisis, survive any drought, and walk through any fire without losing your peace. So hold your anchor steady, refuse to drift, and remember, the same God who brought you this far will not leave you now. He has already prepared the next blessing, the next open door, the next provision, and it's on its way to you right now. Your only job is to stay anchored.